All right. Good evening and welcome to the Math Teaching Podcast No Guilt Book Club 2021 edition, May 2021. And we're so blessed to have Theresa Wills here to talk about her book, Teaching Math at a Distance. We have her for just a little bit. There you go. Thank you, Dusty. We got to have props. We're here to talk about this book, and we've got Theresa with us just for a little bit. She's actually got to go teach class. So blessings of online. I bet you that's just a switch over to a different feed, maybe. There we go. All right.
Sure is. Yep.
Fantastic. And we have Dusty Jones, my co-host on the Teaching Math Teaching podcast and at Sam Houston State. And then right. Theresa Wills. Theresa Wills is at George Mason University. And maybe, Theresa, you want to just give a quick background of yourself and your background to the content of this book?
Yeah, sure. So I am a math coach at heart. It doesn't seem no matter what role I'm in, that's still where I feel at home. I was a middle school teacher for a long time, middle school math coach, elementary math coach. And for a weird 1-year period, I was a technology coach because they got rid of math coaches for some reason. It only happened for 1 year.
They don't need them sometimes, right?
So that's kind of my teaching background. And then, after I received my PhD, I started looking more at university level. But in the time in between, I was doing a lot of adjunct work. And in 2010 was the first time that I started teaching a course online in this synchronous setting. Like that means we have a microphone, we're live. And so each time I taught it, I had a lot of relaxed ease into it because I could go face to face in the middle of it. We could switch around. We just tried some different things. So it was very flexible. And the whole time I try to keep pedagogy up front. So in the last about 5 years, I would teach 2 math specialist courses or 2 pre-service teacher courses back to back, one online, one face-to-face. And what that did is it made sure that I didn't get rid of the rich pedagogy that I wanted to do online and that I implemented it, when I was online. So that's a little bit of my background and how I've been teaching online. And I think people are now familiar with the word synchronous, whereas a year and a half ago, they did not know what that means. So, yeah.
Well, and we just briefly before we hit go live, but we talked a little bit about this book. So you said this book came together in 5 weeks, did you say?
It did.
I mean, I know you said you had a lot of material ready to go, but I mean, still. 5 weeks.
From first words on the paper to final manuscript submission was 5 weeks. I should say final manuscript draft. It went back and forth for a couple other weeks, but a lot of this stuff was written. As I mentioned, people didn't know what synchronous was. So even though I was submitting stuff on synchronous, a lot of things were, I don't really know if there's a place for this here. So I had a lot of ideas, a lot of teacher notes, a lot of anecdotal records, and even a lot of research. And it was dying to go somewhere.
Yeah. No, and it feels like it's right on time. Dusty, sorry.
I was wondering about that timeline because as I'm reading through the first 4, we're going to talk about the first 4 chapters today. And as I was reading those, you had these great vignettes, and it was, like Miss So-and-so, I'm sorry, it starts with an R probably, but Miss Rording started teaching online in the middle of the year. And I was like, how did she write that so, appropriately to what was going on? But it was because of this timeline that we actually had, but you had all this stuff's ready to go. It's really a great read. I've really enjoyed it. I just finished reading the 4th chapter like 20 minutes ago, so it's fresh on my mind here.
It's okay.
Wonderful.
Well, and so we have a few viewers out there, and so again, no guilt. And so if you haven't read the book, that's fine. But if you have read the book, then even better. And these videos will be out and available for whenever people might access them. I know you have materials also for folks that might want to do a book club too on your website. Theresa's website is fantastic for all the resources that are available there. But then also too, if you comment, we should be able to see the comments on our view on StreamYard. So we're streaming to both YouTube and to Facebook Live. So if you have a question or comment that you want to give, you can go ahead and do that. Otherwise, we're going to engage in a conversation on the book as long as we have Theresa here. And then when Theresa's not here, we'll Dusty and I will talk too. But we'd love to field some questions and comments. So that'd be great. So I did like, when you talked about your introduction, Theresa, you talked about being a math coach at heart, and in the book you talked about that kind of that I think it was in the introduction about kind of a moment in your teaching when you're talking about all the 150 standards that you have to teach within a year, and then your math coach talked to you about whether you were teaching mathematics or arithmetic. And so it seemed like that was one of those, I don't know, mile markers of your development as a teacher, and maybe it's kind of in the backbone of this. Can you talk about that moment and how you see that moment throughout the book here?
Absolutely. So I was so fortunate my first year teaching to have Marilyn, a fantastic math coach, really there for me. And in the relationship was so natural. So she came in, and I remember, on the overhead with all my markers lined up so I could have different colors for each step of solving equations. And boy, it was really step by step by step by step. Let's do the green step. Let's do the blue step. And that's when she came out and said, are you just going to be teaching them steps, or are you going to teach them mathematics? And she asked me to go back into, my experience as a learner and what were my favorite courses. Of course, as a very excited mathy folk. I was very into the engineering courses. My undergrad was at Virginia Tech, and I would take a lot of engineering mathematics blended courses. And I was like, I love the problem solving. There was always something rich in it. And so it was so early that first year teaching that she was like, well, then essentially you need to do rich tasks. And so I had that support right at the beginning, and that completely changed my style of teaching. And luckily I didn't have, too many years to make up from that, because she was there shoulder to shoulder with me that first year.
That's pretty good. And just even talking about that relationship, and Dusty and I, we've had a chance to talk to various math coaches on the Teaching Math Teaching podcast a couple times. And just having that kind of relationship, one, is important, but then two, just even some of the questions that she asks you, that's pretty cool. The way that she's helping you look at your own teaching, what can you be doing to better develop it, better, enact it to meet the goal that you want. You want to be doing mathematics, right?
Right.
So Dusty, I know maybe you have a question that you want to jump into. Otherwise, I feel like I could.
Go ahead, Joel. Go ahead. Yeah.
So in talking about the SAMR, I think that was
the SAMR model. Yes.
Yes. So
which is not the same as ASMR.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. Yeah, we have all sorts of acronyms, right? So, but thinking about, at the University of Mississippi, we talked a lot about resilient pedagogy. So thinking about how can you, withstand something like we just had in this past year of, switching online in the midst of a semester, so that you're not throwing out everything, but thinking about how do you, change modalities, and how can you, even enhance your teaching, or thinking about how can you sustain things that you're doing, or maybe even making them better through these environments. And then when we go back to face-to-face, which we're scheduled to do that in the fall, how can you, not throw everything out that you did in that switch? And so it seemed like this substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition it felt like at the heart of that. And thinking about even to what I was doing, was I substituting? Was I augmenting? What was I doing in some of these things? And we even had a discussion with my grad assistants, and we just wrapped up our semester. We talked about what are some things that we want to keep going forward with what we're doing this semester. Cause I think we did, there's mother of invention, right? Some, we create a lot of cool stuff, I think. And so I don't know, when you think about these, which one of the substitution, augmentation, modification, or redefinition, what kind of decision process are you going through when thinking of maybe even some of the initial things that you did in your classroom to think about, well, what am I going to do here? What do I need to do to this task, to this activity?
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. I consider myself a gadget lover skeptical. So I see a gadget, I'm like, ooh, this is cool, but beware of the shiny new object. It is going to be shiny. It is going to be awesome. But is it really rich? And so I think if we, there's many, stages of even mathematics. We just talked about arithmetic versus mathematics. I might think of it as, number chugging and like doing the math. So, the folks that are listening are probably more familiar with kind of those steps. It's the same thing with technology. Is this something that is a, quick fix? Is this something that is a shiny new toy? Or is it rich? Is it rooted in pedagogy? And so one of the things that I bring up all the time in the book is the affordances of using Google Slides, because we can all go in and we all manipulate in real time. And it comes out really obviously in the book, but I'm a big proponent of collaboration. I think that is how we learn best, is through collaboration. So, going in knowing that I value collaboration, it's seen all throughout every chapter, everywhere you go. And so, even though Google Slides is just basically PowerPoint, right? It's not
right.
that great, but the pedagogy that's rooted in it is fantastic.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, just even thinking about, using Google Slides, and even to think like, I think the example you used is like some brainstorming activity, right? And so we could be doing that on the whiteboard. Everyone calls things up. I write things up on a whiteboard in a face-to-face environment. I could even be doing that on individual whiteboards that are at tables, but still I have to walk around. And so even that, just to do that would be maybe a substitution, would be to put that all in Google Slides. They all have an individual whiteboard as a slide in Google Slides, but I can see them fairly quickly rather than having to wander around the room. So even that small use of technology, one could do that in a virtual environment, but also I could do that in a face-to-face environment. So there's some of that resiliency that we're talking about there.
Exactly. And that's what makes it a nice transition for people who are moving to hybrid, high flex. What are some other words we've heard? Concurrent, synchronous, all this new mesh blended.
Yeah.
So once you get the idea of how that worked in the face-to-face, how to do it online, and then I ask myself, what are the affordances of the online? Well, when I can see all 25 of my students' rough draft thinking before it's polished, that is an affordance that I can't get in the face-to-face classroom. So even if I go back face-to-face, I'm going to bring that element with me. There's other things that, maybe isn't as good. And so I'm constantly asking myself, like, is this just as good, better, or not as good as face-to-face? And then that's going to drive what I choose to use.
Yeah, I really like. I like how you use the SAM. You call it SAMR. Is that what you're calling it?
SAMR.
Yeah, the SAMR model, and I like the fact that you're not saying S is bad and R is good. Just what are we doing with the technology? Are we substituting, augmenting, modifying, or redefining the task? And I think that's part of what we do as teachers. Hopefully, is we're reflecting on what we're doing as we we plan something. We implement it. How did it go? What could we do better? This is what humans do, I think, in everyday life. There's a task that there's a task that we're doing, and how could I do this better? What else could I get out of this tool? How could I milk that a little bit more? So I think that's really great that this book has helped me think about, even though I've been teaching online for a year now, I'm no expert. And I really like the fact that I'm looking at this thinking, oh, I'm kind of at the beginner stage here. So this is really helpful to think about this. And then some other things I've already thought about. And I'm like, yeah, good thing Theresa was thinking about those too. So yeah, that's really great.
I'm just posting to our stream just to say that hello at everybody, and feel free to post a comment or question if they have one. So, I know we just have you for another few minutes. And so in part one, it's about, setting the stage, right? And preparing for doing this sort of, like, if you were like to say like one golden nugget, one takeaway from part one, that's like the main thing, what would you say, Theresa, would be that main idea? I know there's tons again.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the main part is ask yourself, what is the pedagogy that you want? You've got to keep that at heart. If it's that you want all students to brainstorm, now you know what you want. You just find the tool to use that. If you want students to brainstorm and categorize, now, your pedagogy, there's a tool for that. So a lot of the things that I bring up are, you want to do attendance. Well, don't call students names. Instead, have them answer a would you rather question with their name in the block. They can do attendance that way. So it's kind of that idea of thinking about what you want and then finding an affordance for it. And, one of the best part about templates, so I have a lot of templates in there, is that I use them again and again and again and again and again. And it doesn't get boring if you change up the title of it, the thing that they're doing. So oftentimes we come in and we do a would you rather just to get started. People know also that that's attendance. Whether I'm talking about my kindergartners who are in Girl Scouts, I'm a troop leader and we do everything online for the last year and a half. They know it's, just a roll call, but they're also really interested in the would you rather situation. It brings up conversation. And so in that first chapter, I really try to get people to think about what is it that you want? And think about the pedagogy. Don't think, oh, I want to go use this tool. That's going at the other end. You need to think about what you want first, and then we can find the tool that meets that need.
Yeah, this is reminding me of our earlier conversation for the Teaching Math Teaching podcast, where you were saying, think about your non-negotiables.
Exactly.
And I like how in the vignettes that I've read so far, you set it up and you say, this teacher really enjoyed doing this, or this was important to this teacher. And so here's how they've reimagined that for the online space. Yeah.
When I liked it too, and then again, I liked how you made that parallel between teaching online and the advice and the advice for parenting. I have 3 kids too, and I've got some siblings that are starting to have kids too, and I'm offering advice all the time. But anyway, they probably know.
Yeah, everyone's got advice to give when it comes to, kid rearing. It's, you've got to potty train like this. You've got to, have them go here 5 times a week. They will offer you advice whether you like it or not. Right. And I do feel like the same thing is with teaching and even online teaching here. But the trick of it is figure out yourself. You've got to know yourself first and foremost. And then you pick and choose the stories that you want to use and you blend it into your own novel. Like, you don't use somebody else's. It's not going to work. You create your own, but you do it by learning about other people.
Yeah. Right. It's almost like you have these like citations, but the citations are stories like, oh, I know somebody else did this. I'm going to try this, but I'm going to also tweak it like this because now I think it'll work better for my kids, which are different from the kids that it was originally were in the original story. So, but, and I know you need to leave now, or do you have one more?
I got one more in me, and then I am going to go teach a class online. It just takes a click of a button to switch over.
Maybe say, how are you using some of the definitions for part 1? So is this a synchronous online?
This is a synchronous online class. It is actually the capstone class for our math specialist program at Mason. And the neat part about it is, so these folks who've been in our program, when the pandemic happened and everyone was going online, they were like, oh my gosh, I need to go back into all my course materials and grab these slides. And they were, in a sense, these digital native teachers. And they were just going right in. And so a lot of the tips that I have for beginner, intermediate, advanced, the advanced ones, I specifically went out to our alum and I said, hey, what are you using? Oh yeah, I was using this one. It's a little more tricky, but I feel ready to do it. And all that was them being a student in the class. So this is actually one where they do their own self-study research project. Oh, nice. They are going to present on the research that they did and the methodologies that they did and how that helped them think about their teaching differently. So I'm in a head there now. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. And we'll see you again. And other chats.
You'll see me all the rest of them for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Theresa.
All right. Take care.
Have a good class.
Bye.
All right. I'm glad that Dusty and I could coordinate our outfits.
Yeah, right. We had to wear blue.
That's right. Fantastic.
And folks can find me on Twitter at Jones Math Ed if they want to see what is behind the blue screen here. So.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, and we just saw a question come in from Julie James. Hey, Julie. How do you meet the needs of students who consistently have interruptions, Wi-Fi, power, people, etc.? Well,
so I don't want to speak for Theresa, but what I read is she really does talk about this because as Julie probably knows, this is a real concern that students may have interruptions, may have difficulty with different devices or students or siblings, maybe they're caring for siblings, or maybe, lots of stuff happens. I'm looking for the chapter. I think it's chapter 2.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Theresa talks a lot about setting norms. One of them is, have a talk early on about having an away message where if you have to be away from your keyboard, I don't know if you just put AFK in the chat box, but you can figure out a way to do that. She also talks about she doesn't require her students to always have the video on, always have the audio on, especially when they're in like large group settings. But when they're in small groups, she does want everyone's mic live, unless there are these issues where students have lots of problems or interruptions. Go ahead.
Actually, I remember that there was, and this was something I highlighted, was about active. Your microphone is active, but not necessarily live. And so that means, to mute and unmute yourself. And you think about what that means is I have to listen to what else is going. I have to anticipate when I might have a chance to speak. I'm unmuting and muting. And so I have to pay attention to what's going on versus always keeping it on or always keeping it off. I like that terminology. I think, and there is a lot of terminology that she has within the book, lots of definitions and such, but I like that definition of active. So, I'm leaning in and I'm paying attention to when I can contribute. Cause again, like she said, like she likes to have a lot of interactions within her classroom, but also there was, talking about equitable instruction. And Dusty, I know you're probably thinking about the same section that I had.
I'm thinking it's in chapter 1, maybe. I think I found that.
Yeah, but just about like having, things that were in or outside of the student's control.
Yes,
and so where their video is on. So considering the purpose of video, and using it only when purposeful. So like, for example, sometimes when we're recording the Math Teaching podcast, we're eliminating our video just to make sure, because one, we don't need to see each other. And we can pay attention and eliminate, and through editing, we can eliminate any long pauses. So we're okay that way. But then also too, it makes sure that we have a good audio quality because it's a podcast. It's an audio podcast. So we don't necessarily need video in that case. Same thing here when she's talking about in the book is like, what's the purpose of the camera? The purpose of the camera is to make sure people are behaving. Well, okay. Well, maybe you can make sure that they're, engaged by making sure you have engaging activities, right? They're engaging with the mic. And then also the camera then just becomes a way to, if they're showing how they did something with manipulative, or they're showing a picture of some drawing that they created or something like that. There's intention behind the use of the tool. So there's intentionality with the microphone, intentionality with the camera. I really appreciated that. And then also too, that means thinking about, it can eliminate some of the, maybe there's some technological issues. And so I don't have to, if I have a bandwidth issue, then it's okay there. I can.
Yeah. A couple other things that I was thinking about related to this. Theresa mentions that she doesn't stream her video constantly. Usually she mentioned using Google Slides. That's something if some of our listeners or viewers haven't seen that, where everyone can be editing the same document at the same time. And so you're looking at that uses up a lot less internet bandwidth to watch that update than it does to watch a video of the teacher, especially if there's not a reason for the students to see your face or to model something. The other thing that I was thinking about is in some of those things that are outside of the student's control, in addition to those distractions that might be happening if, upstairs neighbors getting their kitchen renovated or something, or if there's yard work happening outside that's noisy. You definitely want the students not to have their microphones on. They're having a hard enough time listening to you with all of that, but you don't need it to echo throughout there. Was using the chat box effectively and having students kind of comment through that. And for younger students or students who are not as proficient with maybe typing, they could just have certain emojis that this emoji, means certain things like I'm thinking about that, or I love that idea. Joel, you just posted a link about talking with Jen Wolfe, and I remember listening to your Amidon Planet podcast with Jen, where she was talking about Theresa Will's stuff. And so do you want to say how some of that relates to what we're talking about, reading about here in these first 4 chapters?
I know. I felt like Elf when we first like we're gonna have um Theresa Wolf or Theresa on the Teaching About Teaching podcast. It's like I know her, like I know her name, and it's I mean it's pretty cool to see these you know just the small world that the math teacher educators are, and knowing that Jen was out, and Jen is a friend and a colleague, and just trust what she does so much. And like we had this conversation that we were able to capture for the podcast. Well, we started having the conversation. I'm like, can we just record this because this is so much good stuff?
Right.
And then, Jen came up with all this stuff, and a lot of it was pointing to Theresa's website and all this information she had and all these templates and that she freely shares. And even in my math methods class, we talk a lot about messy tasks, and she does these like free professional. It's great that we get to talk about her when she's not here. These free professional developments on Saturdays that she records and posts to Google to YouTube on messy tasks. But anyway, all these things, and so we captured that conversation, and actually Jen was pretty generous about sharing some resources there too. And some of these templates are from Theresa Wills. And so I love the attendance thing where it was, and I think Jen has like, I don't know, 4 or 5 different examples where it was like this or that, where it's like, ice cream or gelato, taco or burrito. I mean, like all sorts of different, like, very, low stakes things where 1, they're using the tools, 2, they're engaged, and 3, you get to see, you get a little bit of insight into them, and like, you like these movies versus this movie. Oh, that's your favorite movie. Oh, that's my favorite. Like those sorts of just mindless connections, which we're kind of craving connections right now. But then also you're doing attendance,
Right.
So it's like these multiple boxes you can check just by doing this one thing, and all you need is a simple template.
Then the students are able to connect with each other and learn who likes the same thing as them, or learn something about somebody else. Yeah. And I like what Shannon has said here, listening on a different podcast about these topics. In gaming, the game is important, the audio is not. The slides are the meat of the presentation, not the video, not the audio of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and thank you, Shannon. And like thinking about what is the point? And I remember we were talking about universal design in one of my classes, and talking about the game Rock Band. Did you ever play that, Dusty? I know you play guitar, right?
I play Guitar Hero because I'm about 10 years behind on my video game system. So I played on the Wii.
Well, Rock Band was a little bit cool because it had a bunch of other instruments too. But and I would ask my students about universal, like, what's the point about Rock Band? And they're thinking about it. And I'm like, the point is to rock. And so like you could pick what instrument you could be a part of. You could pick what what difficulties you want, but the point is to get together and to rock together, right? And to make music in the game. But thinking about that, what is the intent of what you're trying to do? And then just like Theresa said, like, what are the tools and modality or whatever you need to do to accomplish that fact? And then also with the technology, you can get maybe a little bit extra, like, again, like that attendance example was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So where were you doing a lot of highlighting, I don't know. Do you write in your books, Dusty?
Sometimes, yes. This time I was like, I need to read this. And so I was reading it and I was really enjoying it, but I didn't mark anything up, but I got some places where I kind of, circle back to some folded corners and stuff like that.
Well, I guess one thing that I wanted to point out, which was pretty cool in the book, and again, no guilt book club. So if you haven't read the book, that's fine. But still, that hopefully this might intrigue you to go get it. Is the norms with regards to, and she jumps right into regards to safety and cyberbullying and addressing that, and like with any time, again, you facilitate interactions and where there's ways to communicate with each other. Well, just like in a face-to-face classroom with kids, you can have opportunities for kids to say mean things. You can say mean things in a virtual space, and you can say mean things in a physical space, but like giving like, hey, here's some ideas about how you can address these things. And even having like, she's got a beautiful map where there's a sample cyberbullying discussion support and how best to like work through an experience that could happen. And I think, I mean, those sorts of things are kind of like, hey, you might want to jump right into how am I best going to teach with these virtual manipulatives, but like setting this again, part one is all about setting the stage. And this is something where setting these norms and thinking about how do I deal with technological issues? How do I deal with cyberbullying? How do I deal with some of these things are pretty important. And so, I mean, I just even like the example of if you're having, some someone saying something to you in a direct chat or something like that, like you send a smiley face direct chat or a frowny face direct emoji directly to the teacher so that can be addressed. Right.
I liked the do not drive during instruction. This was some norm that I don't have to set up in my face-to-face classes. No one is driving when we're in my face-to-face classroom. But that's, I mean, at first I read it and I thought, okay, is this information for the instructor? Yes. Okay. I will not do that. But I realize it's, to high school students, to college students, or any student that can drive, I guess, don't while you're doing that. Your life is more important than this lesson. And some other stuff that I thought was really good about how she sets up that mistakes happen. And she has a slide that says, remember, mistakes happen, and mistakes is spelled incorrectly. And she lets a student point out, and then, depending on how it goes, they can talk about how she can point out how the student modeled appropriate or kind behavior in doing that. And then thinking about how, if we're all using, maybe in Theresa's classes, we're all using Google Slides a lot, where you can totally change something somebody did, and how might that make you feel if somebody changed what you did, and how can we handle that? And then the other thing I really liked, and I thought we're at the end of our semester, so there's no point in me doing it now, but updating your profile picture kind of regularly to, Joel, I notice your facial hair is different than it was last time we had, you're constantly on the move there.
That's right.
But if my students are seeing a picture of me, that was taken, a couple of years ago, and it's always the same picture of me, but wouldn't that be interesting to them if it was a different picture every once in a while? Yeah.
Yeah. And just having they talk about that being a way for students to express agency, right? To like, not only for us to change, but for them to change their profile picture to represent them. I know I talked about this in my class that just wrapped up. We talked about how do we create student identity in their classrooms. And so with groups, we would talk about making a shield or something like that represents our group. Well, same thing here. You could, create something to represent yourself in the profile picture. And then when we see these groups, we can see like, oh, what do we have here for this group? Like, what are some commonalities? And you can almost look at the pictures and see some of those things too. So that's kind of cool. I did like the agency part within this. She had a section in chapter 2 about student agency through choice. And we talked in one of the previous No Guilt Book Club in December. We talked with Catherine Ye, Mark Allison, Kirli Kane Hurtado about their book Reimagining. Oh, no, it's not up here anymore. I was leafing through it somewhere. Reimagining the mathematics classroom. And they talked about setting up a physical classroom and having manipulatives available for, so that when they're needed, you can just, they're right there. They're at kid level, can go get them. Or they're on the table, whatever. They're accessible. They're not like off limits. Like you're only going to use what I say you can use. And so virtual manipulatives, and thinking about that from my own perspective, like, okay, how do we have that universal access of virtual manipulatives as well? Like, how best can I represent my thinking on this problem? Do I want to use, some sort of virtual like base 10 blocks, or do I want to use geoboard, like whatever thing I want to, or number line, whatever. And so, I'm thinking like, oh, how can I set up a slide? I bet you Jen Wolf might have already done this. How can I set up a slide that is like like the wall of manipulatives, right? That's like, oh, I want to go to, and here's a link to this website to go grab my, Math Learning Center has a great set of virtual manipulatives that I can go there and grab the manipulatives that I want in order to insert a picture into my slide to represent my thinking. And I think that just that alone, I'm thinking, that's something that I could definitely bring into my math methods class, because I want my math methods students to be thinking like, what could I use for this messy problem that I just put in front of them? And so having something like that, and to see how important it is to see there's different ways that you can represent your thinking. So I don't know. I really like that.
And when we're teaching online, or when we're moving something that we've been doing in the classroom into an online environment, of course, there's a lot of it that feels overwhelming. Like I felt, I mean, personally, I felt like it was on me to reinvent everything, or find everything, or locate everything. And I found it really freeing that Theresa points out, you can actually offload some of that to your students through choice, to say, go find a manipulative or a virtual manipulative for base blocks, or that you would use to model this problem, maybe not even make it specific to base blocks. And when we're working with prospective teachers, how much more important is that? Because that's the skill that they need. I don't know how many times you've got the email after students graduated where they, contact you, but I've had almost zero people reaching back to me saying, hey, what was a good online manipulative for this? I mean, teachers have to go find some of those things, and students can go find some of those things.
Yeah.
And those things are changing. The National Library of Virtual Manipulatives that I kind of cut my teeth on, I think that was Flash based, and Flash is gone now. So, Homestar Runners found a way to come back, but maybe not every Flash based thing can be there. So,
yeah, and it kind of, I mean, again, the thing is too, once you start exposing them to things, they might be like, hey, this is the best base 10 blocks,
right.
and you're thinking like, would kids actually do? Yeah, like kids might actually do that, like trying to find good stuff, because they've got skills that they could use to help you out, teach me better.
An example that she gave, there's certain things, like you could use Google Slides and you could make your own squares and arrange them, but there are some virtual manipulatives out there that once you get 10 of something, it joins it together. Or if you drag it somewhere else, it breaks a 10 apart. Or there's others where it won't join them together unless you kind of tell it to join them together. And so there's those different levels of what mathematics do I want the students to do, or what do I want the programs to do? Talking about GeoGebra, for example, I teach a Euclidean geometry class, and my students at the college level, I just give them GeoGebra, but I noticed that at the very beginning of the semester, when we were just getting used to the tool, I wanted them to create an equilateral triangle. And there is a kind of a macro tool that you can just create a regular polygon and say, I want 3 sides, and boom, there it is. So there's ways I can think, well, can I limit some of those tools, or could I open up the task? And this wasn't my idea, but I forget where I read it, but someone suggested their activity is find as many ways to make a regular triangle, equilateral triangle, as possible using this tool. And so, there's different ways to get students to work with those tools.
Yeah. So it seems like an important point. And to know when I was teaching, I would teach an integrated math class for freshmen, basically using Core Plus. So it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But we would talk about, like, sometimes there was times when we wanted them to do something by hand. Sometimes we wanted to use graphing calculator, and or to use tables, do tables by hand, do tables in the calculator. And like, we had that sort of I could figure that out. Like, yep, you need your graphing calculator today. You won't need it today, because we're going to do things here on the handout. We're going to do things here in the calculator. And so it's just that same thinking, but now we're thinking like, well, she talked about too, what are the affordances of this tool? What can I do with it? What do I want? What's the math behind it? Oh, sorry, Siri came on. Speaking of tools. But thinking about, what's the intention behind this? And like, it just opens up, like, what are the things I could use, and like but first I need to think like, well, what's the goal? Right. It goes for everything. What is the goal of this? Right.
Yeah. There are lots of shiny new tools out there, and maybe we want to use them, but we have to first, ground that in what's the goal.
Yeah. I remember, did you ever play like any fantasy baseball or football? Like
football, yeah.
Yeah. So I remember back when I kind of liked doing it by hand.
Right.
Like, I kind of liked looking through the box scores. I kind of liked doing like having my notebook and keeping track. Like, that was kind of fun, like that. And so now that it's automatic, it, like, some of the fun just went away. But
right. So for people who enjoy digging into the stuff and doing the stats, Now it's just, I finish a game and I'm like, I know I've won, but they won't tell me until Tuesday because, it's not over, but I know it's over,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right. What were some other things that stood out to you, Dusty?
Looking at the different ways to do breakout rooms, and I'm just going to make a confession. I haven't had successful breakout rooms yet. And so Theresa has given me a lot of good things to think about.
What was causing you problems, Dusty? Just curious.
Yeah. So
it's confession time.
Yeah. So the first time that I tried to do a breakout room was in the fall of 2020. So this past fall, and I was teaching Calculus 1 for the first time. I hadn't done that. And I was teaching it online, and I hadn't taught Calculus 1 or taught online. And I had listened to the podcast episode with you and Jen Wolfe, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go for this. I'm gonna try some stuff. And I'd been to some trainings where we had some new collaboration tools, and I forget what they're called, and I'm not gonna look them up right now. Mm-hmm. But I thought I got enough training on that. I thought, okay, I think we can make this work. And I put the students in breakout groups on Zoom, and I said, here's this task. And I checked in on them, and, maybe a little bit was happening, but not much. And I kind of talked with them a little bit, and then, time was up. And so I didn't allow it. So what went wrong? So I didn't allow enough time, first of all. Also, I didn't give them kind of a low stakes task to start with, so they could just, get used to, and when I say low stakes, like, would you rather, or, come up with one thing that you guys have in common, just something that was non-mathematical. It was a easier algebra problem, but it wasn't trivial.
Right.
So I didn't allow enough time. And then we were trying to get to know the tool and do the math at the same time. And then with the whole collaboration, this is August of 2020. People are wondering, do I have to have my camera on? Do I have to have my microphone on? And I had told them, I don't care if you have your camera on. I'm not interested in seeing into your space. But the microphone, we really didn't set up the norm. So I didn't, I had thought some about this, but I had not thought as much as I have now. And Theresa's given us some things to kind of organize that. In my breakout rooms in the spring, when I have had them, I've got one class that's pretty much, two classes that have been asynchronous, and one class that is blended. So we meet face-to-face on Thursdays, and we meet through Zoom on Tuesdays. And there, the breakout rooms sometimes work and sometimes not. But I think I just didn't put enough thought into them, because I thought, well, we're meeting face-to-face on Thursday, and that's kind of my comfort zone. So now seeing some of these layouts of some different breakout room phases, or just how to lay out the breakout room activity and set a timer, and things like that have made me, and kind of putting the task there. I guess the other thing I'm thinking about in the face-to-face classroom, maybe I have 5 different steps that I want them to proceed through during this activity. And I'm watching and I'm monitoring the time, and I can, kind of go around to each group and say, okay, now you do this. And I just haven't learned how to facilitate that yet.
Well, and again, she has 100 pages on setting the stage. So, she's the expert. And so this is pretty amazing, but I do like that. I think it's on page 50 where these breakout room phases, where it's got two, and she has a 2 by 2 by 2, which is 2 students per group, 2 minutes in rooms, 2 low stakes questions. What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite ice cream? Right. So, and then helps them demonstrate comfort with the mic, demonstrates kindness, uses safety protocol, right? So can exercise some of those things before, creates and implements class norms. So, hey, we're going to, keeping active. And so practice, and so maybe you're even prompting them, hey, only when you're speaking, unmute. And when you're not speaking, make sure you mute, and just practice that with these 2 low-level questions. Now do the same thing with the 4 by 4, 4 students per group, 4 minutes in rooms, 1 low-level task. So maybe it's like all right, based off of it's all, let's come up with a what's one movie we can all agree on, and what's one place we can all go get ice cream and be happy, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Or just what's one movie we can all agree on. That'd be one low level task, right? Combining all that. And then moving into a 5 by 10 by 1, which is 5 students per group, 10 minutes in rooms, one high level task. Again, gives equitable talk time, values collaboration, comfort with technology, implements problem solving, oath, which is something that she talks about earlier too. But thinking about these sorts of structures, to be like, you can use that and you can have a Google Slides template for that structure too. So kids know, okay, we're going to go through these 3 sort of phases too. And here's the template that we can use for this. And now we're just changing up. What are the questions? What are the low level task? What's the high level task that we're going to warm up to? So, even if there's students I haven't interacted with a lot, now we've talked a little bit, right?
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit. So,
yeah. So I think, as in the face-to-face classroom, establishing those norms is something that we do and we have to do. And I've learned how to do that in face-to-face. And so I'm just stretching that. You had mentioned the problem-solving oath, and it,
oh yeah.
Here it is. My name, problems to do my best. I'm sorry, I'm staying the Boy Scout thing, Scout motto. I blank, promise to try my best. I will make sense of patterns and numbers. I will use manipulatives and drawings. I will make mistakes. I will ask questions. I will listen to other ideas. I will stay engaged by always trying to find another solution or representation. I'm a problem solver. I make the world a better place. So when we have Theresa back, I'd like to ask her how she implements that, how she uses that.
Yeah.
Is this something that they remind themselves on a regular basis? Is this on a slide somewhere? But that's great.
Yeah. One of the perks of the hosting the Teaching Math Teaching podcast, we got sent one of those in the mail, which is pretty.
This is swag right there.
This is swag. We got some swag. Dusty, have you had a lot of experience using virtual manipulatives?
I have, yes.
What is your favorite ones to use?
Well, I guess there's different styles, and I'm not. I'm thinking of lots of people who know a lot more about virtual manipulatives as I'm talking about this. My colleague here at Sam Houston State, Emma Bullock, does research on those. But my
tread lightly, yeah.
So my favorite two, and I guess I'll say these are my favorite two because I've used them a lot and they're very versatile. Are GeoGebra and Desmos, and these are. And where did I get to know these? I got to know these in designing and working with a class that's for calculus for prospective middle school teachers. And so I'm not sure how I would implement these in, say, when I taught 4th grade, I really didn't use Desmos and GeoGebra. I used other things, things like from the National Library virtual manipulatives or NCTM illuminations, and some of those things that like with the base blocks. But what I like about GeoGebra, what I like about Desmos, and what I learned early on is someone would say, Dr. Jones, can Desmos, I need to do this in Desmos, or I need to do this in GeoGebra. And I said, oh, GeoGebra doesn't do that. And then I learned, oh, actually, GeoGebra does do that, and I just didn't know where it was. Or GeoGebra doesn't do that today, or Desmos doesn't do that today, but there are people who are constantly working on making these things better. And so, it used to be that I couldn't get a box and whisker plot with either of those, but I think now both of them do that.
Oh, wow.
I go somewhere else for my box. I like to make box and whisker plots by hand, but I go to Codap for that. So I have, I have, depending on the task, depending on what I'm trying to do. So those are my go-tos, and I'm not, I don't have any swag from any of those places. But, what about you?
Well, I was just gonna. I love the Math Learning Centers. Just because it's a nice suite of apps that you can go to,
Sure.
and then they're free. I like to use things that also freely available, like Desmos and GeoGebra. They're also available, but like that that my students aren't intimidated by, like they can jump into them, and I teach elementary math methods, so that's a good group right there to start with.
Yeah.
But I was thinking too of, well, two things. One, I was thinking of a story back when I was in high school, way back when, and I had I believe it was the TI-85 that did not have tables. Like
Okay.
the TI 92, I think did, and the TI 85 did not, or 82 did, whatever. Anyway, but there was some kid that my calculus teacher pointed out that a kid created a program that you
Oh,
could
yeah.
then do tables on your TI 85 with matrices, like, which basically that the matrix is a
Right.
table. And it was like one of those things like, whoa, the kid and my teacher was amazed by it. And it was the first time I like really acknowledged like, oh wow, a kid, a student who had wherever, there was no internet. It was probably, I don't know what it was in, like some email newsletter or something, that had demonstrated to my teacher, hey, here's something that you can do with this calculator that you said you couldn't do. And it was like this kind of cool thing. And so like the expertise could lie with your students. And now thinking about this whole population of kids that are now coming and moving along and having these online experiences, like the expertise that's going to lie within the kids that are experiencing different types of, virtual instruction, that are coming into classrooms or coming into universities, that are going to have these experiences that let's say most likely there could be some that are better than what I was ever doing, and to lean on them and to see like, what are the virtual manipulators? How did you, graph what, and like, oh, wow, I never seen this tool before. Cause they're, like you said, they're redoing themselves or revamping themselves. There's all sorts of new things happening all the time. And it's like, you get exposed to these things. And that goes back to, kind of Theresa's talking about within tools. It's like, what tools are you investing in that you can use so that you can, continue to use them, versus like, being open to using new tools as well. Like there's kind of that balance there. Like, you don't want to throw 1,000 tools at kids, but then too, you also want to be open, like, hey, now these tools are better, or there's a better tool out there. So,
yeah, we had a student in a class, I guess it was a couple of years ago, and was doing stuff with Desmos that we had not seen. No, the lighting just got weird in here. So I got the shades and the sun's hitting me. So he was doing all these things with Desmos teacher stuff that I had never peeked behind that curtain. And it was just amazing. And I was digging in my drawer. This is my TI-85. I have I can't turn it on. It doesn't work anymore, but I got it, for my birthday, my 16th birthday. So it's almost 30 years old. There's a picture of me, my 16-year-old self, like smiling, like so happy that I got this graphing calculator.
This is confession time.
And that was the thing, was how can I make this tool do something else? If kids were drawing Mickey Mouse or the Batman symbol, and it was like, wow, whoa, math can do this, and how is that very different than kids doing these really cool Desmos drawing projects, using functions and relations and equations to shade stuff in cool, interesting ways. And it's like, wow, that's really using mathematics. Let's make that an assignment. Let's capitalize on that. And to see where I think your point, where is this going to go? How much more cool stuff can we get with the students that are growing up with this?
Right. And, and I think we're almost out of time here, but even thinking about, this whole setup is, and it's not to overwhelm to say like, you have to be aware of all these tools that are out there, but to even think like, what are your set of tools? What might be your templates going into a semester? What are your routines? What are your templates? And setting that up and thinking about from a foundation sort of perspective of, what do I do that I like in my face-to-face, and how can I use these tools and the online environment to not only sustain that, but then also possibly to enhance it. So even if you're switching modalities back and forth, like I know that we're going to be using Google Slides to do some small group teaching, which we did in Zoom rooms this past year, but now we're going to be doing it possibly in a face-to-face at tables, but they're going to have Google Slides, and so that they can commonly manipulate things that they want, or they can use whiteboard, getting my to-be teachers or my pre-service teachers to start thinking about, what tools am I using? Why am I using them? What do they offer me? What are the limitations, and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I think that's that setup, we're thinking about this preparation sort of thing, like not to be overwhelmed by the tools, but also just to be open to what the possibilities are and how you can best, again, sustain and or enhance what you're already doing.
Yeah. And in chapter 4, she lays out a handful, looks like maybe 6 different strategies that she names that are ways that in these vignettes that she describes a teacher, you know, it was important for the teacher to do this in the classroom period, face-to-face or virtual, but they were used to doing it in the face-to-face. How do they move that into the virtual setting? And then how does it make it even, like you said, how do we think about maybe this makes it even better? The one I was remembering was the, well, I a couple I want to talk about. They talked about the math clothesline. I forget which one it was. A student, it was a number routine, but in the face-to-face classroom, there's a clothesline. Students come in and take.
Is it Mr. Jones?
It is Mr. Jones, yeah, but it's not me.
Yeah,
I was not that proficient in my online instruction as this, but there may be another Mr. Jones out there. You know, in the face-to-face setting, in the physical setting, you've got a clothesline, you've got clothespins and an index card, and maybe you put numbers on the card, or maybe you let the students pick the numbers and they put them on the clothesline. It turns into something that can be, number one, attendance. Just, you know, if the students put their names on there, they can put that there, and then you can. He has the students put them there. Then the other students highlight, you know, ones they think might be wrong or in the wrong place. But you can't do that as efficiently in the classroom because not everybody can get up there and see where the line is, or you're managing, you know, 15 to 26, you know, fourth graders up there in one spot. And that's another story right there, you know. And then I thought I could even, as a teacher, I could even seed a wrong example if I wanted to. You know, I could put something in the wrong place and nobody would know it was me doing it, you know, whereas I can't do that in face-to-face. The other one I liked was the show and tell, the math show and tell.
Oh, hold on. What about even just tapping like telling a student, like direct message and put it in the wrong spot? Yeah. Like even, you know, just to like, yeah, you know, just to, hey, let's have a little fun here.
I've got your back.
People are paying attention.
Yeah,
exactly.
The student-led math show and tell is something, you know, where can I find these shapes in the real world? And this is made so different and so much better online, because I can go find stuff in my house and take a picture of it and upload it. Maybe I can't take that thing to school. Maybe I shouldn't be taking that thing to school. Maybe I can't draw that thing, but I can take a picture of it and I can put it there. And then it's archived. Then the teacher can go back and say, remember Marie's cylinder, you know, or something like that.
Yeah. And I saw my 9-year-old do that. Well, he was 8 at the time last year. Like when all of a sudden he's like tearing around the house, like, what are you doing? You should be in class. Like, I am in class. He's like, I got to find a rectangle. Like, I got to find a square, you know? Yeah. And it was cool to see, you know, they incorporated movement into the class. Well, so then that means also you got to set up norms. Hey, let's not run in your, you know, like all sorts of different things too. Don't bring the camera on into your parents' bedroom, like, or you're something like that, or the bathroom.
Right. Yeah.
You know, all sorts of different other norms that you have to pay attention to, but still that allows for, you know, creativity and things where, you know, even something that I'm supposed to find a square, but I can't find a square. But if I look at this thing at the right angle, I can make it a square, you know, and that says something, you know? That's pretty cool.
Or the opposite way, you know, I could turn this piece of paper into a trapezoid or something. If I hold it the right way to the camera.
Yeah.
I can't obviously do it right now, but there is a great example of parallel lines on my face and behind me.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Yeah, that actually the one about the student-led math show and tell, that one of our grad students here, or doctoral students, she's getting ready to defend, and she's doing some things with a Rubik's Cube and dealing with resilience and how to maintain like develop it and some of those things within elementary kids. And she's using a virtual Rubik's Cube.
Oh, cool.
And to do some of those things. And so, like, again, in the beginning of the book, you know, Theresa talks about, like, you know, there might be some inequities with technology. We can think about how we can minimize those. How can we you know, help out, you know, like try to, you know, flatten that as much as possible, but also too, the ability to get almost any virtual manipulative that are freely available out there into the students' hands versus what is available physically at our schools,
Yeah.
there might be some differences there. So like to be open to these things and having them available. So that's, I don't know, lots of good stuff so far. And we've only just begun. This is just part one.
And from people who I've who have read this book and talked to me about it, even from Theresa herself, who's kind of facilitated or heard about people doing book clubs on here. We're about to get to the good stuff. And so if this part that I really enjoyed, the first 4 chapters, talking about planning and setting up your norms, I can't wait to dig into the next couple times. So what are we looking at next time?
Yeah, next time I think we're dealing with chapter 5 and chapter 6.
Awesome.
If I am right there, I think we're doing the next 2 chapters. So again, yeah, and we'll have Theresa here for the whole time. So looking forward to that. And we've also posted her website, and so you can see all the great stuff that she's got there in the meantime.
There's a wills.com.
There's a wills.com. Yeah. So that's great. So anyway, any final words, Dusty?
I'm just really looking forward to this. I hope people are enjoying this, and what's our No Guilt Book Club, no time, no problem. That's the hashtags. Yeah. So
that's right. So yeah, it's a great resource, and we're glad that we get to share it. And hopefully you're seeing that you can gain something even if you haven't read the book. And maybe it's like, hey, I kind of want to get that book, or maybe you can talk to that math coach or something to get it. Or you are the math coach, maybe you can get it also.
Yeah,
so
you'll be glad you did.
That's right. All right. Well, Dusty, we're gonna sign off, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.